Me today and agreeing to speak about the topic of mortgage process for first-time home buyers. How are you doing?
Good, good. My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to help people out for sure. Give them some
Okay.
information they may or may not know.
Yeah, great. So why don't we start with a brief introduction about yourself and how long you've been a mortgage broker, a bit about your background.
Of course, in the finance industry for almost 25 years, I actually used to refer a lot of people to brokers.
Okay.
My focus was more credit in the background, and really it was a good way to consolidate that increased cash flow. So anytime somebody, was a homeowner and there's equity there and they had debt to deal with, the first thing is, hey, why don't you try to refinance your mortgage and better your cash flow and your situation, right? So really, I've been dealing with mortgages for quite some time. I didn't get into it until
Hmm.
about 3 years ago, right? And really, COVID pushed me into doing that. And really, in 2017, when I bought my current place, I used a broker for the first time. And I was like, wow, this is a pretty easy experience. And I'm like, okay, so, at that time, like, maybe I should become one. I'm like, I've dealt with brokers. I never used them personally, but at that time, my wife was pregnant with my second kid. And we're like, so I was like, okay, like maybe I shouldn't. But, again, you start something, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but, here I am.
All right. Okay, thank you. So the reason why I thought that it was important to why I selected this specific topic was because with dealing home with home buyers, first-time home buyers, there's a lot of confusion. I don't know if that's like in your industry too, but I'll have the first-time home buyers, they'll ask me questions that are mortgage questions, and then I'm sure you get questions that are real estate questions. So
Yes.
I just wanted to kind of clear that up.
Yep.
And I actually dug up a interesting statistic from 2023. So in 2023, 24% of first-time home buyers were under the age of 30. 33% were between the ages of 30 to 34, and 43% of first-time home buyers were 35 and older.
Yeah.
So that's a massive increase, especially with the 35 and older crowd, which was the last time it was taken in 2021, it was only 33% for
Yep.
35 and older versus 2023, which is now it's 43%. So I from the statistics, you could see that everything is kind of first time home buyers are, they're not 18 anymore, they're not 20. They're getting older, and it's because of various reasons like a rising cost of home ownership, the other financial burdens related to maybe their schooling, and people are just getting married later, or maybe they're not even getting married and having kids later generally. So I just thought that if you're in that older crowd, the 35 and older, maybe they don't even know in a mortgage broker to ask these kind of questions, or it might be a bit embarrassing to ask their friends how their process was. So I just wanted to interview a professional like you who could kind of in plain speak kind of sort out any questions that they might have, and then they could refer to it in this video.
Of course. I think misconception is it's never too late. I mean,
Yeah.
I have clients now that are into their 50s buying their first one,
Wow.
right? And
Okay.
it's really just, and I always tell people when you're ready, just try to see what you can afford versus saying, maybe I'll wait or, the prices are going to do this or the rates are going to do that. When you're ready, just find out what you're going to do. And for me,
Yeah.
myself personally, um, I was in a condo before and maybe a lot longer than it should have been because again, like, like I wasn't active in talking to a broker or seeing because, I didn't know, hey, what could I afford, all that
Yeah.
stuff. And what really pushed me is we were having, like I mentioned earlier, we're
Yeah.
having a second child. So like, okay, well, we got to do it,
That's
right?
often the case, right? That's something in
Yeah.
life pushes you.
So it's more reactive than proactive. And
Yeah.
I think that challenge is obviously more when it comes to the major urban areas like Toronto, where prices are through the roof, right?
Yeah.
Or have gone through the roof. And that coupled with higher rates has definitely lowered the amount that people can be approved for. And the challenge of, like I've dealt with many first time buyers that say, hey, I want to live in Toronto. I work in Toronto.
Mm.
Sure, like I can approve anybody, but this is what you can be approved for. And it's often not enough to
No, no.
stay in Toronto
Yeah.
proper, especially if you're not working from home, right?
Yeah.
But then when you talk about outside the city center, the more you go out, the more affordable it can be. But then obviously there's a challenge of, hey, where are you working and where's your income? So
Right.
I mean, is there a fear of missing out? Is there, comparison, which is a theft of joy, all that stuff? I always say, you know what? I mean, first of all, I'm not going to be judgmental on your age and why you
No,
just buying
no.
now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, I think people just have to say, hey, get a pre-approval. It may not be the amount you're looking for. At the same time, you've lost nothing, right?
Right.
It's rejection, but what do you lose? At least you know where you're at, right?
Yeah.
You know where you're at, you know what you can afford, then you have some planning involved, right? And we can get into that later on how we can help clients with the planning.
Yeah, I just have a question later on in our
Yeah.
interview about that.
Okay.
But my first question is that the Bank of Canada, they recently reduced the interest rate by 50 basis points
Yeah.
from 4.25 to 3.75%. So do you think this will make any difference, especially to the first-time home buyers? And if so, what would those changes be?
Unfortunately, for the first time buyer, the impact is not going to be as much as an investor
Okay.
or a seasoned buyer or somebody sort of upsizing, right? And I think a common misconception is that when these rates are announced, people think fixed rates come down too. And fixed
Mm,
rates, as of right now, November 1st, fixed rates have been stable for like the last 60, 90 days. And
okay.
actually, it's gone up a little bit, right? You know, we have to remind people that, hey, when the bank announces cuts to the rates, it impacts variable rates the next day, right? So right now, a 5-year variable rate, you're looking at about 5%. Okay. Is that a big difference from what it was, before the cuts happened? Absolutely, right?
Hmm.
But on the first time buyer, if they have the room to afford a variable rate, absolutely. But 8 out of 10 times, maybe 9 out of 10 times, we need the lowest rate possible because of the stress test, right? We
Okay.
have to stress test it. So the lower rate they can get, then the more they can afford. So as a first time buyer with not a lot of, if you don't have a ton of down payment or your income is still growing,
Mm.
um, the variable rates coming down may not be in your favor for at least another 6 months.
Oh, okay. So you don't find like a knee-jerk reaction after these kind of announcements.
No, and I think it's really, the investors that need to come out of the
Yeah,
woodwork and buy.
yeah,
There's an article about condos not being sold because the investors are not there to buy it. And, a lot of families are not buying up the condos. Really, historically, investors buy these properties and then they rent it, right? So that's kind of how
yeah.
the cycle goes. And right now, nobody's buying them.
I think the impact of the ban of non-residents buying, like they're not able to buy investment property, I think that has had a huge impact in the condo market.
That's
So
a different
yeah,
webinar.
that's a different discussion for
Yeah,
another
yeah.
interview. Okay.
Yes.
The second question, in your opinion, what's the difference between going to the bank versus going to an independent mortgage broker like you to get a mortgage? And what's the advantages and disadvantages of the bank versus independent broker?
Of course. And, I don't want to sit here and badmouth the banks all day, right?
Yeah.
If you have a relationship with the bank, can it be more convenient? Of course. They have your information, they
Right.
have your history. You might have a checking account with them, you might have a GIC with them, all that good stuff, right? And, if you have a relationship with your financial advisor in the bank, whatever the case is, it might be a convenient thing. Okay.
Okay.
Less documentation, less questions, all of that stuff. And depending on the bank, they may be more flexible in taking appointments. Okay.
Okay.
Those are the advantages. And the banks sometimes, um, they can make certain exceptions within their branch that typically the overall bank may not do. And that's case by case basis. Okay. When it comes to, well, let's stick with the bank. So,
Okay.
with the bank though, the limiting factor with the bank is they're going to offer you only their services and their products,
Of
right?
course.
And each bank is the same but different, like any lender we deal with. And if you don't fit in that box, it's going to be no, we can't help you,
Okay.
right? And I don't think there's a lot more going into that as far as like, hey, how can we solve the problem or how can we adjust it so that the box can fit or it can fit in the box? So, that leads a segue into a broker where, at least for us, we're a bit more flexible. Number one, with myself with appointments. I mean, I understand that if I'm dealing with first-time buyers that are working that, 8 to 6 job, well, I have to be able to be taking appointments at 7 p.m., which
Yeah,
which
right.
happens, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, they don't have to come into the office. This is fine, right?
Yeah.
I can meet them at their place. We can go to a coffee shop. We're not going to name brands, just in
Or you could
case.
do Zoom, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep, yep.
At the same time, it's one application.
Mm,
It's maybe a bit more inconvenient because we have to ask for all the documents,
right.
but it's one application and, we will review it. And if there's anything that may stick out of the box, then we're going to find a way to say, okay, how do we structure this so that it can fit into a box and which box can it fit into? And it's not just the one bank. It can be bank A, bank B, and we also deal with what's more commonly called now as mortgage finance companies.
Okay.
And these are institutions, like best example I could think of is Equitable Bank. You see them,
Mm,
right? They take deposits, they have high interest savings accounts, but they also lend out loans, right? Mortgages. So that's what they deal with. So they're called mortgage finance companies. So those are the other guys that we really work with that are not really don't have brick and mortar, right?
hmm.
They're more virtual. They might have a branch here and there. I mean, a perfect example was Tangerine way, way, way back
Right,
when it was
right.
ING Direct,
Yeah.
right? Where you don't really, you don't you knew ING, but you don't go into the mall and see ING um branch. You see, like they had used to have these ATMs and all that stuff. But
Yeah, right.
and those companies they're chartered banks. They're not
Mm.
just boiler rooms of people. They're chartered banks and
Right.
they follow the rules and they lend money out. So I think for the convenience for mortgage brokers is number one, this is how we get paid. I think that on the bank side, for the most part, whether or not they approve a deal, they're still getting their base salary and
Mm.
maybe a bonus. But for
Yeah.
us, you know what? We get paid, and just like you, we get paid on the deal being completed, right? So
Mm.
for us, there's always that, I think, vested interest. There's that care about let's get this deal done. Let's help somebody out.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing, well, from my experience of dealing with mortgage brokers, it's more personable experience versus dealing with a bank.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of our mortgage brokers that we talk to, they're taking calls at like 10, 11, things are
Yeah.
not, 9 to 5 or whatever time the banks are open. So
Yeah.
I think that that gives people some assurance that they could, hey, I'm going to call John. I have a question about my mortgage or something changed or whatever. And would you agree with that? It's more customer
Yeah.
service.
Of course. And I've taken those calls at 10, especially if there's deadlines. Again, it's
Yeah, of course.
we got to find a balance regardless, right? And chances are when you're calling me, you're calling my cell phone.
Hmm.
So, for me it's 2 in 1, right? When you're
Yeah,
when you're talking to somebody in the bank, chances are you're calling their bank line, right?
right.
So I think accessibility there is there. And again, I'm not trying to badmouth all the
No.
bankers or all the banks, but I think the flexibility, the convenience is a big plus for us.
Okay, great. John, I have a lot of clients that are self-employed. And
Mhm.
what is the difference between the getting the mortgage for as a self-employed versus a salaried employee where you know how much they make, it's on paper in
Yeah.
terms of obtaining a mortgage? And would you say it's more difficult for to obtain a mortgage as a self-employed?
It's it's a yes and no answer.
Okay,
And like you hit the nail on the head there. The biggest difference is with a salaried employee, they have T4s.
right.
They can generally say, hey, this person works full time. They work 80 hours every 2 weeks. They get paid this much. It's more guaranteed, if you can say.
Mm,
When you're
okay.
talking self-employed, really the biggest challenges are, have you been doing it for more than 2 years?
Mm,
Have you been filing taxes? Do you owe taxes? How much income are you claiming? So those are the immediate challenges with the self-employed. Is it more difficult? It depends. It depends on, like what is it you're doing, how long you've been doing it for, and how much income are you claiming. And we understand that even us on the phone here as being self-employed,
Yep.
you're able to you have expenses and you're able to use those expenses to lower your income so that your tax obligations are lower,
Right,
right?
right.
But at the end of the day, your income also is going to dictate how much you can borrow, right?
Yeah.
So, somebody making $200,000 on paper, they pay taxes, the lender sees that that's great. But if
Mm,
you're self-employed and your income was 200,000, your revenue was 200,000, sorry, let me rephrase that. But how much was your income? How much
mm,
was your income? How much did you claim as your income? And how do we qualify as much as possible towards getting a loan? So is it more complicated? Yes, it can be.
yes,
Is
yes, it
it
can be.
impossible? No, it's not. Is it going to be a bit
Okay.
more work? Absolutely, right?
Okay.
And again, because like now you have to deal with, like if you have an accountant, you have to look at the T1 generals, we have to
Mm,
look at your bank statements. Bank statements are very crucial,
right.
and 12 months of bank statements, the business bank account statements. So it's a lot more intensive. But
Mm,
is it impossible? No. Does it mean you have to pay higher rates right away? Absolutely not. You can still get preferred rates depending on the scenario altogether, right? Because again, like you can look at it as there's also the component of the person borrowing, right? The person's credit score is a credit score there, and I think that's again another whole thing about credit score. So,
so I guess from your answer, it's a little bit more work intensive if you're self-employed, but it's not
yeah,
impossible.
yeah, and again, it's just if you have good record keeping, you have your
Right.
invoices, you have your bank statements, you've done your taxes, and you're all up to date, it can be a lot faster.
So the more organized you are, the
Yeah,
easier it is.
absolutely. And that you know what, that goes for both, right? But again,
Right.
there's more paperwork involved with a self-employed person, so the more
Yeah.
organized you are, yes.
Yes, I know this coming from tax season. Yeah, I know it's difficult. So in today's market, would you say it's better to have a fixed or variable mortgage?
Ooh, that's a good one. And I mean, I'm talking as of right now, right? Some people might
Right,
go back
right
on the
now.
thing like, yeah,
Yeah.
right now. And until, I mean, you said it earlier with the last question, when the Bank of Canada came out with half a point cut, it's really a case for us to say, hey, if you can go variable, do it.
Okay.
Okay. Because everybody's forecasting for it to go down further, right?
Okay.
How much more and how fast is always the question. And I can't guarantee you how much more it'll go down, right?
But
But
not to the COVID levels. No.
I don't think we're going to see
No.
that for a while or
No.
maybe ever.
Yeah.
But like, hey, like you saw the Bank of Canada react with half a point, which is like
Right.
it's a big statement saying, hey, we need to help the economy out, spur the economy. So right now, and I mentioned earlier, if you're able to qualify for a variable rate and you're a bit more flexible with your finances, take the variable. Take the
Okay.
variable, um, write it out, let the rates come down, and then you can lock it in, right? But again, like some people are more comfortable with a fixed environment where they know their payments, they know it's going to be this amount for this many years, and they can budget around it, right?
Okay.
But like it comes down to personal preference. And I'm dealing
Yeah.
with it now with first time buyers because as much as I say to them, hey, take the variable or this is my advice, it comes down to personal preference, right?
Yeah. They're a
You
risk
know,
taker if they're not a risk taker.
yeah. Or
Yeah.
like, hey, you know what? But if you're able to pay, and a lot of people that have variable, I mean, they saw their payments go this way.
Mm,
And then now when the rates are coming down, they see their payments kind of go this way. Because again, your payments will adjust with the rate, right?
yeah.
So your payments will go up if the rate goes up, your payments will go down if the rate goes down. So right now, when we see rates are coming down, that's a good way to kind of get in and say, okay, how much lower can it get? Yeah.
So how do people transition? This is not on my list of questions, but I'm sure you can answer it. If at first when they buy their home, they're like, okay, fixed rate, like let's just stick with that. But then they change their mind when they see, the rate is going down.
Yeah.
How do they change from a fixed to a variable?
And that's a bit more difficult than
Okay.
the other way around because, when
Okay.
it comes to a fixed rate, you're typically paying a penalty to break the
Right.
mortgage plus what they call an interest rate differential, which again, that could be another half an hour discussion. right?
Okay.
To break that and get into it. When you're going from a variable to a fixed, it's a lot easier. It's typically just 3 months penalty to do that,
Okay.
and you just budget it out, saying, okay, what's the cost going to be, and how is it going to benefit me in the future? So again, like if and same thing, like if you're thinking of moving, thinking of upsizing, and in the next 5 years, you might consider a variable versus a fixed rate,
Okay.
right? So again, but again, if you're a brand new buyer and you're pretty certain that for the next 5 years you're going to be pretty much doing the same thing,
Right.
you may or may not think of having kids, but even then having one kid, you can still stay in the house. Then sure, if you want to just say, you know what, we're going to coast this way, we're going to build up our equity, we're going to build up our jobs, we're going to make more money. The next 5 years, it's straight through, right?
Okay.
But again, if you have, and this is a conversation we have, if you have uncertainty, maybe, your job might move you, or you might want to move jobs. All of a sudden, you're thinking of moving from Toronto to maybe Ottawa, and you have to sell and buy, then variable is probably the way to go.
Okay. As a realtor, the best practice is to get a pre-approval for the buyer. So, when is someone ready versus not ready to buy a home financially? Like, is that something that you can see right away? Like, if someone, let's just say, for example, and I just had this case, if someone is single and they make under a certain amount, like, can you briefly just take a look at someone's like have a conversation or look at
Yeah.
someone's paperwork and say, hey, you're not quite there yet. Can you
Of
tell?
course. And
Okay,
I think that we can lead to another discussion, just because we want to help these
of course.
first time home buyers plan for their purchase, right?
Hmm.
And how do we take a plan that might take 12 months to shorten it down to 6 months? But I think, speaking of the urban markets we were talking about, if you're a single income earner, unless you're making 200,000
Right. It's
plus,
tough for them.
chances are, I mean, again, you're going to be approved, but the
How
amount
much?
is going to be the
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Um, the credit score is important because the credit
Okay.
score kind of tells me how much debt you have to service.
Yeah.
Okay. And that again, debt um, will really lower the amount of mortgage you can get, especially if you have a car you're paying for, you
Mm,
have credit cards with balances, because again, like these are, we take a certain amount of that. I mean, well, the car is a set payment, right?
yeah.
If you have credit card, you have a line of credit, perhaps we take a certain amount of that, say, okay, you have to set aside X amount of money every month to pay these debts, which can't go towards your mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the down payment component, right? Yes, you can get a house with as little as 5%, but if you factor all three, then we kind of look at the picture, right? Say, okay, like what's the income, what's the down payment, and what are the debts? Those are the three main topics that we try to even discuss before we even go much further. And then I say,
Yeah.
and you got to get to know the client. What
Yeah.
are you
Right.
looking for? What are you looking for? Where are you looking? Right?
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes, and as you know, as a realtor, sometimes the expectations are a bit high,
Mm.
right? Which is fine, right?
Yeah.
Then and again, like
It's
me,
always like
me, yeah,
it's
me,
always like that with first time home buyers. Like they have a very high expectation.
yeah, and again, I'm the guy that says no, you can't do that, right? So I'm rejecting you, but again, like hey, I've rejected you, but if it's cost you nothing than an application, but at least you
Right.
know where you stand. At least you know where
Yeah.
you stand, right? Again, I mean, I think everybody that's listening to this call or even on this call said, you know what, we all want the detached, big lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why the heck not? But I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, detaches are going to be above $1 million,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right. So it's about expectation, I guess.
Yeah.
So once someone is ready, can you tell me a bit about the whole process, about obtaining a mortgage, what documents are required, how long it takes, and what to expect?
Yeah, the basic documents, you want to have 2 years T4.
Okay.
Okay. That just shows your average, because we try to get a 2 year average of your income. Okay. Then we support that with your last two pay stubs. We want to make sure that, currently this year, because the T4s right now, you're looking at 2022, 2023. I know we're coming up to the end of the year. That's another topic. But we
Right.
want to say that, hey, for 2024, are you trending at the same level that you made the year before? Is it, if it's higher or lower, why is it significantly lower? Because, these are things that are going to come up, right? Letter of employment, that's very important, right? Your company is going going to confirm that, hey, John is employed as a manager of this and that. He's been with us since 2015, and he works 80 hours every 2 weeks, and he gets a salary of X amount. So that will just help confirm everything there, right?
Okay.
Secondly, the notice of assessments, it's not always top of mind, but we want to look at that just to make sure that there's no income missed. At the same time,
Mm.
if you owe taxes, and we want to make sure that's cleared. Okay,
Yeah.
because again, that's also a liability, right?
Yeah.
So your notice of assessments will show that, hey, did you get a refund or did you owe money?
Yeah.
If you owed money, have you paid it off,
Okay.
right? And those are the very basic things we want to see.
And how long does it take approximately after they've submitted their documents?
Yeah, so I think I think it takes longer to get the documents than to
Yeah,
actually
for sure, for sure.
process it, right? But
Yeah,
again, if you're ultra organized, and I'm dealing with a couple now where they gave me the documents within 2 hours, I was
awesome.
shocked. I was like, whoa! And they said, oh, everything's here. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
it's
It's
fine. I
it's
mean,
lovely working with those kind of
yeah,
clients.
and especially if you have online access to CRA, you have online access to
Yeah.
your payroll, you have online access to your statements, all that stuff. It really helps to get everything put together. But then to turn it around, really, it's about a day. Say,
Oh, okay.
say, hey, this is a pre-approval is about a day. But then when you're actually purchasing and say, okay, like here's the purchase agreement. Let's make sure everything is good. That could take up to 5 business days, depending.
Okay. And does it, I know this is on the top of mind for a lot of first-time home buyers, but does it affect their credit rating? Like if they inquire with their bank first and then they don't get a favorable rate and then they go seek a independent mortgage broker so shopping around, does it affect their
Yeah.
credit?
There's two ways about that. I mean, Equifax tells us that if you're shopping around within a certain amount of time, it shouldn't.
Right.
But I don't think it's a specific formula, or I don't know what the algorithms are.
Mm.
But at the same time, think about this, right? Like if you're going to TD, you go to TD, you make your appointments, you do your thing, you find out, then a week or two later, then you have to go to, sorry, and I shouldn't be saying bank names,
A
the blue
prepaid.
bank. You got to
Blue.
go to the blue bank. You got to do that. You got to do this. You got to do You start the whole process over. Then 2 weeks later, you got to go to the red bank, right? So that's what 4 or 6 weeks you're spending doing that,
Right.
and those inquiries may impact that, right?
Right.
Because they're like spread apart. Again, with me, we pull one credit report, okay, and that credit report is used. We use that credit report depending how many lenders we do, and it doesn't add any hits to your credit.
Okay. Okay. Good to
Yeah.
know. And what are the main obstacles right now with people getting a mortgage?
It's really the affordability factor, right?
Mm.
And
Okay.
again, a lot of people say, hey, you can afford X amount, but what they're looking for is X amount. So there's kind of
Mm.
disparity there, right?
Right.
And
Right.
again, like it depends on the situation. Like, hey, where are you moving to, right? Like, hey, I'd love to get a condo downtown. Uh,
Okay.
a condo downtown versus a condo in Mississauga, there's going to be a price
Of
difference.
course. Yeah.
Okay. But rates have come down. So a lot of people that were looking a year ago, they should be coming back and say, hey, how much can I afford now?
Okay.
Okay. If their income is the same or it's increased, then they should be coming back and say, hey, how much can I afford now?
Okay. And I think you've covered this next question about fees. So it's the same for you and me. It's a commission based, right? But we don't
Yeah.
get paid until the deal closes.
Yeah. For 99% of our deals, the lender takes care of the mortgage agent, right?
Okay.
And there's no additional cost to the borrower.
Okay.
The lender pays the mortgage agent, right? And then, like the only time we charge something if we're talking about other deals outside of the A lending space, which could be another topic.
Okay. And what are your predictions for the mortgage industry for the rest of the year, maybe into early 2025?
I think there's a lot of demand, right? A lot of
Okay.
demand.
Yeah, a
We
lot of
know,
pent up demand, I find.
yeah, we know that a lot of immigration has happened, and I'm not
Mm.
here to say pro or against immigration, but we know that our population has grown quite a bit since COVID, right? And everybody that's come into the country or has been in the country and in that stage of buying a house, they want a house. Okay.
Hmm.
I just think it's a matter of what is that trigger to open that gate a little bit more.
Yeah,
right? The
right.
gate's opening, but what's that trigger that's going to bust that door wide open and really get the demand going?
Okay. I think
So in
affordability is just,
2025,
yeah.
I think it's going to happen in 20, when is it? Is it going to
Yeah.
be in, the winter market, spring market? We don't know.
Right.
There's going to be that click where it's saying, okay, we got to act now. And I think some buyers that I'm dealing with now are realizing, hey, you know what? Rates are down, prices are still good. Maybe now it's time to act.
Yeah. And can you possibly give me an situation where initially it seemed very difficult or almost impossible for a first-time home buyer to buy a house, to get pre-approved, and then in the end, with your expertise, you were able to help them out?
I'll cut you off. We have added this 241 to record.
Yep.
You might have to jump off, jump back in for the next 40 minutes just to
Okay.
cover those few questions. Okay.
Sure.
So
Okay.
let's jump off and come back.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so as a last question, John, can you give me an example of a situation where it seemed at first impossible or difficult for the first-time home buyer to get pre-approved, but in the end it worked out due to your experience and the expertise that you provided?
Of course, and there's quite a few situations, and I'm dealing with a couple now, because I feel in today's market it's tough in general.
Mm,
But I always go back to this story just because I want to outline where expertise and just attention to detail can be a big
okay.
breaking or deal breaker or big factor. So, bit of background, this client, I hooked up with her. Sorry, you can take that one.
We know what you mean. We know what you
I
mean.
connected with her, and like she was saying, hey, I'm looking for a house, this and that. Didn't hear back. And then I happened to follow up saying, hey, how's everything? I think like 4 months, 5 months later,
Okay.
I'm like, did you get a mortgage? She's like, no, I got declined by the Blue Bank. And I'm like,
Okay.
okay, I wonder why, right? So I said,
Okay.
are you okay to share the paperwork you send and we can take a look? So I'm looking through, as I mentioned earlier, the basic documents. And where I think that the deal went sour was her letter of employment showed temporary full-time. Okay.
Hmm. Okay.
I asked her, I'm like, what does that mean? She's like, I was like, are you full-time? Like, are you like on contract? She goes, no, I'm full-time. I've been here
Oh,
for X number of years. So I think it's just the way they worded it because she worked or works, I don't know if she still works there, worked for an agency that places
oh, okay.
nurses, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
temporary meant that she was at a location for temporary periods of time, right? She
Okay.
wasn't stationed at a location for a long time. So, maybe 2 weeks and then she gets sent to another location. So I
Like a
said, okay.
contract.
Yeah. Or, just like, she still works for the company,
Right.
but, again, she's needed at this, care facility. And then after a couple of months, maybe she goes there.
Mm.
So I said, okay, are you able to talk to your employer? I mean, and we're not trying to fraudulently change the information. We're just
No,
saying,
no.
hey, can you just ask them if they can reword this as saying like
Right.
you are permanent full time? And absolutely, we got the letter. So I think the Blue Bank kind of just went through the process. They saw that as an issue and just declined it without even looking into it further. Or at
Oh.
least from what she tells me, there's no other explanation why she couldn't get
So
the
when
blue.
the bank declines you, do they give you a reason?
I think they should.
Yeah, I think
I
they
think they
should. Yeah.
should. But again, I don't know their processes internally, right? So I
Okay.
think a lot of the stuff is done automatically.
Oh,
It's fed into a system.
yeah.
System will say yes or no, and that's it, right?
Okay.
Where us, again, we're looking at the application and saying, okay, like what's not fitting, and
Mm,
is there something that we can do or we can clarify further? And again, here it just came down to the letter of employment
wording
saying,
or
yeah.
whatever.
And
Yeah.
I mean, the T4s were there, right? So it was kind of weird. So I
Strange.
guess again, because it shows temporary. So
Yeah.
it was just a matter of clarifying that without really modifying the documents in a fraudulent way and just saying, yeah, no, it's just, hey, it was probably worded in a way that the bank wasn't comfortable with, and we got
Hmm.
the mortgage. And I'm
Okay.
happy for it.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
that was like How long did that take you to kind of see that little
Not
issue?
not very long. And I just
Okay.
said, and again, just asking her, say, hey, so this is what I see. I said, like getting a letter maybe took like a day or two, depending. Some companies might take a
Yeah.
little longer, some are maybe more quick, depending on the size, and depending if payroll is done centrally. Sometimes it's,
Mhm.
like a day, maybe, a couple of days after, depending, right? So, and that's why you should tell people, it's like, hey, get the letter of employment, because again, it might take a couple of days, right? So, depending on how, and then sometimes companies just give you a standard layout, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes you can just say, hey, like, are you able to include this and that? If they say no, then that's not a problem. And, as long as we have the basics in there.
Yeah, thank you, John. I hope that people who are watching are able to get some kind of value. And if they have any more questions, can you share a bit about where they could reach you?
Yeah. Can I share my screen or no?
Sure, but you could hold up your business card.
I
That's a
can. Hang
low-tech
on.
way of doing it.
It is a low tech way. Hang on a sec. I gotta get my
Or I could just put your information at the bottom, the
um
description,
on where? On the chat?
like on the comments or whatever.
Here you go. Can you see that? No.
No,
Chat? Can't see the chat.
no. I
Okay.
think
I
only
mean,
I can see the chat.
okay. Hold on. I had something to share. I don't know if I can share my screen
You know
though.
what? Why
I
don't
can, I can.
I can make you a host. So I'll make you a host and then you could share your details.
I guess you can see that. No?
I see a whole bunch of backgrounds. So maybe I made you a host too early, but it will be worth it because then people will be able to see your contact information.
All right. Hope you can see that. Okay.
Awesome. Yes, I could see that.
So really it just comes down to, this is a Linktree code.
Yep,
They give you all my socials, my email, my phone number. Okay.
very helpful.
Right now, like, I mean, my number is easy because the last four digits are my name. So it's six four
Oh,
seven
cool. I didn't know
two
that.
one eight John.
Okay.
Okay. I got that number so long ago and I've stuck with it.
Did you purposely get it or did you just like,
Yeah, I think way
oh, cool.
back, I forgot who I was with, you want to pick the last four? I think back
Oh,
then it was
cool.
still an option. I'm like, okay, 5646, the alphanumeric, it's John, right? So I'm like, yeah,
Okay.
why not? And I've stuck with, I mean, and this was, during a time when you can start porting your number. Thank goodness, right?
Yeah.
That's how aged I am.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all getting there. Thank you so much, John. And I also prepared a free home buyer guide for anybody who wants. They can just comment below, and it includes steps, tips, and common mistakes that home buyers make. Thank you so much again for joining me. Hopefully, we'll have another topic in the future.
Thanks, Steph. Really appreciate it and look forward to it.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye bye.